everyone. Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan, along with my co-host, Kathryn Peterson. And today we are welcoming another guest into the podcast where we'll get an opportunity to dig into not only this person, but his profession and some of what he's doing to take many things that we all know and make them fresh and find some new ways to approach specifically topics around recruiting this summer in real estate and mortgage lending and how we continue to retain the talent we have on our teams. And that's why I'm so excited to welcome my friend Sean McClusky, because he is a veteran who, like me, might sport a little bit of gray hair and comes into this recording with just yards and yards of experience of not just building teams, but being a great teammate on the teams he's been a part of. And so I think his perspective will come from that point of view. And I think those of you who are listening will get to learn a lot about how to be a great team player while we dig into this topic. I first met Sean at a local gym here in the Portland area when I moved to Portland, and he was one of the first guys to say to me, "Hey, you need to get involved with this TMC group with Building Champions." And that, in fact, did happen a couple of years later. And as I did, Sean and I began a habit of regularly getting a group of people out for an early morning walk before our morning sessions. And some of those conversations are my favorite memories from TMC. So without any further ado, I want to welcome not just my friend, but your guest today, Sean McClusky. How you doing today, buddy?
Great. Good afternoon, wherever you're at. Good morning.
That's a good point. You know, depending on where you're listening, we're global now, Sean. So it's possible. You'll even catch somebody in the middle of the night. Kathryn, I want to make sure I tee you up for this because you do such a great job. I want to make sure that as we spend some time with Sean, we not only get to know a little bit about him and his story, but we learn a little bit about how he approaches over 30 years of leadership in the mortgage lending space. So I'll hand the mic over to you, and I look forward to being a part of this.
Great. Thanks, Sean, for being here. It's you've been one of the people that I've known more recently, but I had heard about you before. And that's always great when you meet somebody and get to know them a lot better after hearing the background. So it's been all good stuff. So, because I don't know and our viewers don't know, tell us a bit more about how you got into recruiting and a little bit more about your background.
So I think it just became part of the role. I didn't start in the mortgage industry. In fact, my mom was a realtor and I tried to do everything I could to stay away from this industry because I saw her nights, her weekends be committed in a way that probably didn't make for a very balanced life at all. So I started in the insurance and investment and then in industry. And then in 1998, I actually got into the mortgage world, started with a company called First Horizon. And my job really there was inside sales. Then it moved to outside as an account executive. And it was purely wholesale. And what I learned in that experience was that as a bank employee, Michael, you might be able to attest to this. I mean, wholesale is it's just the redheaded stepchild. I mean, they liked the volume, but they didn't understand that you could build a relationship in that way. And so we left to start our own company. And even then, my role wasn't to recruit. My role, not specifically outside, but inside, to recruit great teammates. And by recruiting great teammates continued to recruit and wean out some of the weak players. But it over time, as I sold that company in 2011 to a publicly traded company where I was president. But again, my job wasn't recruiting, but indirectly it was recruiting. It was always about finding great team members and helping those team members find great team members. Probably today is the purest role I've had in recruiting. And so my job is I don't have to do any of the high level corporate meetings. I don't have to run meetings. I don't have to be at any of those tables. I just get to find people that I like to work with, that I hope to end my career with, and see what is working or isn't working for them, and see if we're a better value match. And so the recruiting piece, it just is part of what I've done, but today it is without question the focus of what I do.
All right, you just gave us a really great flyover of a lot of things at a high level. But I want to dig into a few of those. So rewind the tape for me a little bit. And Kathryn, those of us who remember before digital, we had to rewind the tape. And if it got stuck, you had to stick a pencil in there and kind of figure out how to get that cassette moving again. Sean, when you look back to where your career started, building what became the company that ultimately you sold. How important was the vision for what you were creating to attract who you wanted to be a part of that? How much of a visionary did you need to be at that time? And how clear were you about what you were trying to create and maybe how it differentiated from other options that were out there? As you mentioned, retail, wholesale, we've seen lots of different shades in this business. How did you accomplish that as a young man when you hadn't done that before?
We missed. I mean, we completely missed. And what I mean by that was when we left the bank environment to start our company, we thought 5 of us would become 20 of us. And we would do a boutique type style of wholesale lending. Short, I mean, maybe we didn't wear the same colors. We didn't walk down the same hallway, but you knew us, we knew you, we knew your referral partners. It's really the main reason I joined Building Champions was because I wanted to hear what they were telling the best of the best and have my account executives go out and not say, hey, what file can I help you with? Because that gets played out pretty soon or pretty quickly, but it's how can I help you be a better loan officer to your realtors? What are the best of the best in the marketplace telling their people? And then, oh yeah, by the way, is there a file I could help you with? And so 5 of us actually became 142 of us. And the idea of doing 20 million turned into 220 million a month. It was a great miss. And we weathered the darkness of, I'm talking about the when was it 07, was it 08? It was 06 for us. Our first EPD came in August of 06. And the thought process was, we got an EPD. Gosh, we have an EPD. And so what do we do with that? And we looked at the paper and we actually had written our own paper. One of my 2 partners actually he is the most intelligent guy in the mortgage world. He wrote our own guidelines. We sold them directly to Wall Street. But when we looked at that type of paper and we got our first EPD, we said, what's our exposure look like? It was just great teammates. It was just, and the way we hired great teammates was we asked them to do the very things that we were doing. We didn't ask them to do something that we thought, hey, this is how you should do it, but this is how we've done it. And that started with one of my other 2 partners, somebody I met in 1982, who was my mother's loan officer's processor's assistant. And this guy later became the VP at US Bank. He started a company that ultimately got bought by First Horizon, and he and I and one other left to start our company. And the vision was simply work hard, say what you're going to do, and then do what you said. There wasn't much more magic than that. It was really my indoctrination into Building Champions. So the idea of that business planning, it wasn't that I didn't know how to business plan, but the idea of forecasting and vision and core convictions and those things were. We eventually got to those ideas. We got to those places. But I think in the beginning, we just showed up. We showed up every day and we asked them to do the things we were doing. And that attracted other people.
So I'm going to pull out a couple gems before we go past them. I wonder if they're the same ones Michael's about to pull out. So one, you had a person to look to, the person who ended up at US Bank. And I think that mentorship is huge, and that I know you believe in that wholeheartedly, but I just wanted to make sure we pulled that little bit out. And then the other thing is you do what you expect the others to do. And I think those are both key pieces and important in recruiting, but also in a team and also in business. So I just wanted to pull those out because I think those were great gems that you just provided, Sean. So thanks. And Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, without a doubt, Kathryn, and you definitely pegged them. And so I'll just segue off of that second one. So as you're out modeling what you expect others to follow, so you're leading by example, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're doing the work, you're not telling people how to do it, you're showing them, you're getting in there. How did you handle it when people came along in your organization that weren't matching up with either the work ethic or the focus or the drive that you and your core team were bringing? How did you handle folks that just maybe weren't in the right seat on the bus?
The interesting part of that is rarely did we have to. The tribe, the team weaned out the weak players because it was so apparent what was expected. And again, it wasn't because it was written down well or it was sitting on a board when you walked in. That came later, but it was because the team, I struggled. phrases I struggled with mostly was this: well, that's not my job. And it's just amazing. That's just not my job. Well, what does that mean? So wait for somebody else to pick it up, learn how to do it, involve another team member. There's so many better ways to phrase that. One, I'm not comfortable with this, or two, I don't understand how to do this, or I think this is actually Kathryn's, and I'm gonna reach out to Kathryn and see if she can help me. And that was how it started top down. And when team members said, that's not my job, another team member would say, this probably isn't a good place for you. So it never rose to the place where we had to win those people out. People understood. I mean, they really did. It was really not until 2008 was a horrible year. In 2008, we had 4 rounds of layoffs. And the first 2 rounds, everybody's like, yeah, it's no surprise. Third one hurt, and the fourth one was painful because those were people that were great, but maybe not diverse enough, maybe not, multifunctioning, unfortunately, in a way that we needed people to wear 6 hats for a period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those were hard times for all of us who went through that. But leading up to that, I think one of the things that it just seems like such a simple but beautiful thing is you've got people on this team who are guarding the culture for you because they own it. They are the culture. And so I hope our listeners are paying attention to that. Is you can't just put that poster up on a wall and expect that to move the needle. That happens, and what I'm hearing you say, Sean, is that happens because you guys live that, you breathe it. It's woven into the fabric of who you are. Therefore, the folks that you're attracting to join you, they participate in it, and suddenly you're not having to be the guy that singles out the individual who's struggling. The team is recognizing that, and they're probably solutioning that as they go. It's not like, hey, this person isn't working. Your team is also probably trying to come around that person and say, how do we get them to the level that they need to be? Which is a really interesting dynamic. I'm sure some folks are out there thinking, I wish I had a team like that. Why do you think that was so natural for you, and others struggle so much to find that version of a team where hungry, humble, smart players are able to help be the filter for the culture?
It probably started with player 1, which was my senior partner. I mean, it was Tim. It was he had done everything. And so, I mean, the loan officer's processor's assistant had become the processor, who had then become the loan officer, who had then become the manager, who had then become the VP. He could run AUS. I mean, when AUS was just starting, he knew how to send transbox. He actually understood how to fix a fax machine. We all did those things. Yes, we actually had those functioning machines back then, but we all did those things and then when you could say, well, get the manual and look at these things, or let me walk over and show you how to do it. I think that was even more impactful, and that was really how he led. It got so crazy, so busy that we had 5 desks in his office. So as the branch manager back then, he wasn't, I'm going to be over here and I'm going to isolate myself. He was in it. And that just attracted or didn't attract people. And so I really think it started with him. And where did that come from in me? That's a whole childhood story. That's a whole nother podcast we won't get into. So
You're tempting us, you know that. But Kathryn, I'll let you keep us on track.
Okay, good. So now your primary focus is recruiting. And what about recruiting really wakes you up in the morning, excites you? Why do you like that job?
Connection, people. COVID was terrifying. I mean, the isolation of that, the lack of connection, the simplicity of just saying, let's go grab a cup of coffee. I'd love to hear your story. And tell me how you got here and what's important to you. It works in this environment because I've had multiple crossings with you, Kathryn, and Michael and I have, we have, as he said, walked. We've walked. We have to get out of town sometimes to walk. We figured out how to do it inside town sometimes, but we were part of, we're part of the group that Michael's part of, and we knew 4 times a year we were always going to see each other, and so we were super intentional when we did see each other, and that's the part I like. People. I like people. I really can't, I don't have a finger to say there's anybody that I don't like. If I don't like you, it's because I don't know you. I just needed to get more information. Everybody has a story. Everybody is a certain way because of something that happened in their life or circumstance or something like that. I just want to, I want to hear it. I want to learn more about what makes people tick.
Oh, that's so great, because that comes back to something we've talked a lot about, is curiosity and really learning about people. And I think that's one thing that makes you special and who you are, Sean. So I'm glad that you brought that up so that our audience would hear that as well, because I think both Michael and I probably already know that about you. So,
All right, so I want to flip that one over, Sean.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I would tell you it's a building championism, or it's one of my first coaches at Building Champions, which was master the questions, don't master the answers. And that was, and I try to live hungry for that, hungry for more, hungry to learn about you. There's enough people that say, hey, enough of me talking about me. Now you talk about me. That's terrible.
Well, that might be the setup for exactly what I was going to say as I suggested we flip that over. You've seen recruiting done wrong. Let's just call it, it's not effective. And I'd love to see from your point of view, given the experience you've had, you've seen some folks who you think, gosh, you got it all wrong. Why are you doing it this way? And yet there are some folks who can't help but make it all about them. They want to sell everything. They want to. Why is it in your mind? Just if you could play the observer to some of these other folks that are trying to build their organizations, why do they struggle so much when they're doing recruiting wrong?
That implies that I'm doing recruiting right. So I don't know that I can actually, affirm that. But what I would tell here are some of the things that I struggle with when it comes to recruiting. Because I still get recruited regularly. I get calls weekly, sometimes daily. There's a hunger to find people, which is only interesting because in the system I show as a loan officer, but if they look at my production, it shows as 0 the last 3-4 years. I only produced back in 18 and 19 because my Oregon group needed a principal lending manager for Utah, and that required somebody to actually stop and study for 40 hours. But on top of that, and that was the beginning of a really starting to be a pretty robust time. So I didn't know which loan officer I was going to say, hey, take a time out and do this 40 hours and then take this test. But on top of that, it required production, which I hadn't done robustly since 2009. So I actually had to go back and produce. And so all of a sudden my phone even rang more. But what was interesting about that time when it rang is that I'd get a call and it would say, hey, Sean, Michael Regan would really love to spend some time with you and hear more about your business. And I would say, well, I just was with Michael 2 weeks ago. Have Michael call me if he wants to get together. And what I mean by that is because of all the different events that we get to go to, there are not the majority, but certainly a lot of leaders that I know that work in my similar capacity who know what I do. And it's very clear that they had a caller calling who didn't do any research or understand who I was or what my relationship was with the person they were recruiting for. And I think part of the challenge, and maybe it makes me less effective because I'm not omnipresent. But that being said, when you have a caller setting up as many meetings as possible, then it becomes a numbers game. And to a degree, it is a numbers game. But for me, it's a relationship game. I'd rather find a few people that I really want to go deep with rather than hit 100 people and hope that 2 of those stick. And I know efficiently that there's arguments for both. And at bats is a good thing. More at bats is a good thing. But bad at bats, I don't know that bad at bats are good at bats. And so I'm the caller. I don't have a caller or a robo-caller or an AI caller. I do the recon on LinkedIn. I do the Facebook stalking. Yeah, it doesn't sound good when I say it that way, but I mean, it is. I tend to know who I'm talking to, and it is rare. There was a guy last month that I send out I don't LinkedIn message very often if I don't know you, but I sent this message out to this guy and I said, this is crazy. You live in the Northwest and we don't have one LinkedIn contact not one crossing LinkedIn contact. And I know you haven't been in the business that long, but you're a unicorn. I'd love to hear how you got that, that unicorn, and understand how you got here. But when I do see people that have connections, then I will call people if I don't know them very well, I will call other people that I know and say, hey, what do you know about Kathryn? What do you know about Michael? What do you know about, you said, whomever, without naming names, but I mean, I want to hear more about that person, because I scrutinize over the quality of the person, because I don't want to add a teammate that ultimately isn't going to be a keeper. The recruiting piece also is that it is interesting, because there seems to be sometimes chum in the water when people are recruiting. They're like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is going out of business, and I'm gonna just pounce on those people, or this company's doing it so poorly. I tend to not look for those people that have to make the move. Believe me, I want to take those phone calls, but I tend to not look for those people that have to make a move or that have made multiple moves, because they tend to be jumpers. And if there was something that upset them at brand X and at brand Y, then I'm just brand Z. I'm one more in the mix. But what if my value proposition, what if my company's value proposition makes your customer experience better, your loan officer experience better? Now, you're not moving because you have to move. You're moving because you can create a better value proposition for your consumer, for yourself, for your team. And so that isn't just as easy to find as this company that went out of business. It takes longer. And at every company I've been at, whether it was Hyperion or Impact, who we sold to, or Cherry Creek, which is no longer here, I was always the turtle. I never built my team the fastest, but in each of those places, I had the biggest.
Sean, you really touched on something a moment ago that was very tactical. I hope our audience picked up on it. And it seems so obvious when you say it, and yet I don't think it's very obvious out there in the marketplace today. It's, you are making your own phone calls. You are doing your own reconnaissance. Let's don't call it stalking. You're just doing some reconnaissance. You're learning what you need to learn, but it's helping you to do what you said is your ultimate purpose and mission, which is to get to know this person. And it's hard to do that if you're running that through AI or a dialer or some other third party. And I hope our audience sees that when people ask the questions, like, how are other folks successful? And I can't seem to figure it out. Sometimes these are the obvious things that we trip over because we can't believe it's that simple. What do you mean? Just make the calls? Yeah, I actually do my own work. I'm not out there hiding behind some tool or some person. I actually know that person because I make an effort to do it. I hope our audience hears that, because I'm sure that seems natural to you, and yet it's not that. Well, you said it yourself. You receive those phone calls. I'll bet you get a lot more AI callers, dialers, hired formal recruiters who aren't really the ones that you need to talk to. And that seems like such an obvious one to me. I'm really glad you said it so naturally.
But it takes longer. It takes longer. And some people don't even know that they want to leave. They don't need to leave. You shouldn't leave. You shouldn't keep hopping. It's only if you can provide a better experience for your client and for you. That's the only thing that would be the purpose, other than your company's gone. That obviously you have to do something. And so for me, it's those people that have been at a place for 8-9 years. I know it's hard to leave. That's what makes it so good, because if you did leave, it would be compelling. There would have to be a compelling reason, not just product, not just tech, but also relationship. And I think that's one of my top questions I always ask is, how's your company helping you grow? And almost always it's like, what do you mean? Well, I mean, how are they helping you grow? Well, how are you becoming a better loan officer? Well, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay. Do you think you can get better? Do you think there's new things that you could learn? Can you increase the experience? Can you become more efficient? How are they helping you grow? Well, I don't need that. That's almost always that conversation for people that have been in the business for a long time, because they're content, or I sometimes choose the word complacent. So I dislike complacent. I like content. I struggle to find it, but that is the mission, right? To get to contentment. I always hope that we can get better. And that really is a ground me through Building Champions. And I know this is not a commercial for Building Champions, but I would tell you, Michael, that is from day one. My very first conference in learning about Building Champions, it was, how do we get better?
That, I think that's such a key, that people look at themselves and say, hey, where am I at? Do I want to get better? And I want to flip it to the other side, because we have a lot of LOs that listen to this podcast, and I want to make sure we're looking at things from their perspective. So when I changed companies a few years ago, it was very overwhelming and I didn't know what to ask. I hadn't really done it before myself. So what are 3 tips for someone thinking of changing companies? What are questions they should ask, or any tips that you have for them?
We'll start with the tips. I mean, you should be clear on what you want. What are your non-negotiables? And there are people that work for a company that maybe like their immediate boss or support person, but don't like the leader, or like the leader but don't like. I mean, is that important to you? Is that a non-negotiable? Be clear on what your company expects of you. What do they expect of you? And do they actually give you the runway or the tools to be able to execute on that? And then this is probably a newer component today, but you should probably know their financial situation. And that hasn't been as significant as it once was, but today there are companies that maybe won't be here at the end of the year. And there are some big ones that we've seen go in the last 2 years, 1 year, 3 months. So you should have, even if they're privately held, which is the kind of company you want to work for, actually, as opposed to a publicly traded company. That is a completely experiential thing that I can talk about, because I sold my company to a publicly traded company, and the number one person I served, the most important person in every transaction, was the shareholder. And it turned out the second person was the shareholder, and still the shareholder for number 3. And so when you were thinking about the loan officer and the customer, yes, you are important as long as it added value to the shareholder. And so we couldn't make sometimes strategic 3-day out decisions because it impacted, and I'm going to get off that because I want to be positive about this. So, but you should know the financial disposition of your company, because a lot of companies are struggling, and we haven't seen the rigidity of the warehouse lines saying, hey, multiple quarters of negative performance and you're no longer going to have warehouse capacity. They're not going to be able to do it forever. But that's also because so many of those companies were living on they have a ton of capital from the COVID era, and so they could weather some of those storms. But I think be clear on what you want, what your non-negotiables are. Be clear on what they want. These are tips. These aren't questions to ask. Maybe the third one is a question and a tip, which is know their financial disposition. Make sure that it's so hard. And so I've been at my current company now for 14 months. And it's amazing when people come to a company and they're there for 1 week, people in my role, and their message is, this is the most amazing place. You have to come check this out. This is amazing. You're going to be phenomenal here. How do you know a weekend? How do you know a month in? How do you know 6 months in? You don't know. You don't know what they're going to do in times of adversity. So it takes a little bit of time. That's more that tortoise thing for me, because I hate not knowing. And the company I work for now is nearly 8,000 employees. Oh my God, we're big. We're so big. I still don't know what I don't know. But what I do know, I can speak very passionately about, because I've experienced it myself. And that tends to be the other part, is that I want to speak from experience, not from, well, I heard about this at the water cooler. And then the questions, gosh, I think there's a lot of questions. You want to know, how are they going to support you? How is the company going to support me? What do they expect of me? What can I expect from them? What's the company's objective? What's the company's number one objective? I can tell you, my company's objective isn't to be the biggest. My company's objective is to have the greatest market share in every market that we serve. So there's a lot to unpack there. And if we do that, then we will be the biggest. But it's maybe ratcheted back a goal or two. I mean, we could go on and on with questions, but it ultimately, I mean, what's your LOS? Yeah, those are basic questions. Do you have benefits? Sure, I have benefits. What's the loan process? What can I expect? One of the reasons how centralized is the operational experience? So if I live on the West Coast, which is where I do live, is operations out of the East Coast? Does that mean that the lock desk shuts down at 2 West Coast time? That operation shuts down at 2. I mean, the good news is when I wake up, I might have a lot of approvals, which is great. But unfortunately, my clients don't start moving about or start responding to my questions. And so you want to make sure that you understand where your operational experience is going to be. There are so many, countless questions, and it depends on the person. And I try to draw those out of the individuals that I'm recruiting. What's important to you? What about your current company has been working for you? What about your current company isn't working for you? What would you like to see different? Why is that important to you? If that were different, how would that change your effectiveness in your marketplace? That's that mastering questions. That's that building championism.
You're of course getting me turning on that. So let me dig into that just one more layer. Is it important for you when you do build a relationship with someone to find out that they've done the work ahead of time for the meeting that you're having or the call that you've scheduled? Is it important for you that they come prepared, showing or demonstrating that they have those kind of questions in mind, that they're prepared to ask you things about you as a leader, about the organization that you represent, about the offering of some of these things that might matter to them? Or are you comfortable being the journalist and interviewing them and getting them to discover it along the way? Which works better for you when you get someone to engage with you?
I hope for both. I hope that they've done some recon because they're taking I mean, if you're going to change the colors of the team you represent, that's a big decision. And part of my transparency or my honesty is, and I said it already on this podcast, is I still don't know what I don't know. I mean, we are so big. We have products that I'm still discovering, and it's massive. The tech stack, it's overwhelming. So what am I going to use that will make me more effective? And so I hope they ask me those questions. I want them to ask me, what do you have a front end system? Do you have a CRM? What's your LOS? What's the processor's responsibility? Where do I begin and end? Yeah, I want them to ask me those questions. But if they don't, I will tend to talk about those things, or I'll ask them, what's your current experience? I won't tell them what our experience is as much as I'll ask them the questions, what they like about that, because then they give me softballs and I can say, I love that you said that. Let me share with you what we do. But I don't want to just solution. Oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Well, it's not good for me to acknowledge all the things that we can do. Probably the one thing I didn't, I said it, but I want to make sure the question is, I think it's important, even though I said early on at my company, we didn't have the mission statement on a board. We didn't have this. At least the question every loan officer should ask early is, what is the company's vision? What is the objective? What is the core convictions? And the reason that's probably more important to me today is because that's 20 years of experience, having from the time I started my company, to be able to say, here's what I want to say it, but I also want a place they can go and they can reference that. So when we were across the street from each other, Michael, on Meadows, in 5 different places, I had our core convictions on the wall, 5 different places. 5 different places. So you were in the lunchroom, you were walking down the hallway, you were walking outside of my office, there was pretty clarity, but I also wanted, because every time they were on a phone call, I wanted them to be able to handle each phone call, making sure that did I say what I was going to do, and then did I do it? Did I make people feel heard, valued, and understood? And I won't go through all of them, but I mean, that's ultimately, I want that clarity, and I tried to model that, hoping that they would see it and model it themselves. And I think we did a good job of that.
Without a doubt. And I'm never against putting them on the wall. I just want to make sure we live them first. And it sounds like that's where you started. We live them, and then they're there just to serve as a reminder and a refresher. Kathryn, I've got a couple more, but I want to make sure I don't take the flow away from you. Anything else you wanted to ask on this topic?
Something that I just wanted to bring up, because I think the question also becomes, what should you ask yourself before you change companies? And one thing I did that was powerful for myself when I moved is make a list of why I was leaving, why I was willing to make a change, what were the parts of where I was that wasn't working for my business. And I sometimes had to reference that daily, because it's a process to go through, and it's a process. You can be told anything in the recruiting process, and it comes down to, do I really want to leave, and what does that look like for me and my business? And so, is there anything else people should ask themselves before they really make that leap? Because it is a commitment, and I think it's a big commitment, and I'd be curious on your thoughts.
Well, I think you're spot on. To ask your question, to ask yourself, why am I looking, and what about that experience is not going to be replicatable, or am I going to be disappointed again at the new company? How is it going to be different? I think, and Kathryn, I can't answer for you, but I think almost always that answer is leadership. Do I have a leader that will navigate with me, or do I have a leader that says, hey, here's our SOPs, here's the manual, good luck with that? Now, maybe they don't use that last phrase, but it certainly feels like they use that last phrase without actually saying it. You want somebody that's going to roll up their sleeves and get in the trenches with you. And I don't, it's cliche, people don't leave companies, they leave leaders, but I think people leave leaders. I think they get so disenchanted with the lack of visibility, or, unfortunately, a lot of our companies are run by men today. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I'm a man. But that being said, I think there's this, at some companies, there's this feeling of such a bro club, that's unfortunate. And go deeper. If that's your perception, go deeper, learn more, make sure that is or isn't the reality. Make sure that is who the leader that you're connecting with, because really a great leader, this is, Jerry Baker, I mean, his job was to help support me. He always felt like he was working for me. And when your leader feels that way, that's cool. That's the way that it should be, when they're asking, how can I help support you? What can I do more for you? As opposed to, here's what I need from you, and this is what you're not doing. And it has to be a relationship, a symbiotic relationship between both of those. But Kathryn, I think you were spot on. Why am I leaving? But then why is that not going to be replicatable at the new company? And you can't always answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can mitigate, or you can shorten up that life cycle if you understand who you're actually going to work with.
Absolutely.
It's a really great question, Kathryn, because I've seen it happen too many times. The one thing, when I leave a company to go to a new company, the one thing that always goes with me is me, which means if I'm not willing to look in the mirror first and ask those questions before I go, I miss the opportunity to either really find the root of what's causing some of this discontent, or even worse, failing to recognize that maybe I'm expecting too much, and maybe my expectations are creating some of the dysfunction that I'm now experiencing, which is going to lead to one of the questions I wanted to finish with, Sean, is when you're recruiting, we've all seen, I'm going to call them the superstars, the folks that make these, top 1% lists, but they're in the top tier of that 1%. And they're really promoted a lot. We see them all on social media. We see them out on the stage, we go to community events. How do you handle uh, dealing with folks that are performing at that level as a recruiter? Are those folks that draw your attention, or how, as a person who is aware of those folks, how do you view folks that come to you telling you how it's going to be and what they're going to need, and you're going to do it my way because I'm the guy or I'm the gal? How do you handle that?
I don't. I'm past my shock and awe of the high producing performers. I remember being in my first room at a BC event thinking, what am I doing in this room? That person's over there, and that person, I mean, there were some mega stars, and then there was me, who actually, I wasn't in retail, so it didn't make sense even that I was there, because I was never going to have specifically their numbers, although my company did multiple billions. So maybe I could say, hey, I did something right. But that being said, they're still just people, right? And hearing their story and learning and understanding their story. There are some mega producers today that I'm talking to, right? And interesting, as I talk to them, what they say, one in particular who will know this if they listen to this, which is that I'm listening. And that's their response when my question to them is, what's working? What's not working? Would you change anything? Had you thought about these things? And their response was, I'm listening. And that's all I can ask for, is that they're listening, right? What could it look like? Could it be different? Could it be better? And that's a long process for somebody to make a move when their number is not a 9 number or a 10 number, but it's an 11 number. I mean, it's a big volume to move, or a big group to move potentially. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. And I wouldn't just jump on that and take them so quickly either. Kathryn, you asked me, one of the things that you sent me was what's different today in the recruiting process. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that I don't miss on talking about that, because I would tell you that there was a period of time in this industry when people were like, hey, you did a loan? We're going to give you X number of dollars to come over. And if there's anything that's changed, is that there's less free money out there, that people, there's less money transition unless you're doing this at the level you're talking about, Michael, there's just not. Companies have to be really prudent in how they spend their money right now. We don't have a slush fund. We're not printing money in the way that this industry has historically. And I think that the day when we expected big checks to transition are probably not currently the environment that we work in. And so, which is not a bad thing, because people aren't hopping for money until their guarantees run out. People are hopping because it really is, going back to what I said earlier, a better value proposition for them, their team, and the consumer. And it really should be in reverse order. It should be for the consumer, their team, and for them.
Kathryn, what I loved about Sean's answer was, if you notice, he didn't say it's a binary answer. Like, I love recruiting folks who are in that upper echelon, or I won't recruit folks. You know what he said? He went right back to the same answer. I want to get to know them a little better. I want to ask some questions. I want to find out. And Sean, I think that's a really important thing for our audience to hear, is so often we make these binary scenarios, and you seem to find this delicate ability to say, how do I have to choose binary? Maybe I just ask more questions. Maybe if I ask better questions, I'll get better answers. Maybe if I get better answers, I get to know someone and I find out that, hey, maybe the reason they chose those paths in the past was nobody really ever got to know them at a level to where they could build the kind of trust that you're able to build. And I hope, as our audience hears that, there's some hope out there that not everything is about the extremes. There's plenty of space to play right there in the middle, and you do a great job of pulling people into that. All right, here's my last one. Look forward for me. And I don't need you to prognosticate, because I know that's a dangerous place to play. But I think you're also very good at looking at the performance of where the industry is today and the timeline that's ahead of us. What does this industry look like? We're in an IMB space right now, those of us here on the screen, but As you pointed out, there are different options available as well on the wholesale channel and the banking channel. What does the future of our business look like if you're one of the folks tuned in today and thinking, I have no idea what to hang my hat on in the future because I can't see it clearly? What would you tell a person who's trying to look into the future of our industry?
Well, nobody pays me for my opinion, that's for sure. And I mean, I don't know. I've been in this business so long to the extent of where when AUS first came out, people weren't doing AUS. They didn't trust AUS. Then they did AUS. Then AUS was doing ratios that were like, there's no way. Then it was doing it and it did appraisal waivers and on. I mean, we have this business has been the doomsdayer of our business have been out there for since the 26 years I've been in this business. They have said, oh, it's going to be replaced. AI is going to do this. We're going to offshore that. It comes back to that singular thing that I said earlier. It's connection. It's about people. It's about really, I mean, I don't know either of your personal situations well enough to make the statement, but I'm going to make the statement anyway. I would bet you that your situations are not the same. And if we're going to do a loan, tax returns would look different. Your bank statements would look different because every client is different. Nobody's the same. And to some degree, or to the degree at which AI can, there's certain things it just won't be able to interpret. It won't be able to personalize it. As silly as it is, we still, I mean, really good loan officers still write cover letters today because they personalize the situation for the underwriter. So the underwriter feels like they know that person other than it's just this piece of paper, that piece of paper. It gives them an opportunity to say yes. I don't know that even with Chat GPT, it can't, 4.0, it can't do all of those things the way that a human can do it today. Maybe we'll get there. Maybe at some point Skynet will come on and we'll be taken over by the world. But I mean, if you watched a new movie out, Atlas, I mean, it was interesting, right? Because AI was asking a question, pie or cake? Pie or cake? And you said it doesn't have to, why can't it be both? Why do I have to choose? I want both. And I think loan officers should have that same conviction. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be both. Ask good questions. The other thing that I didn't say is I don't interview one and done, two and done, three and done. I have other people because anybody can be great once, but are they great for me like they're great for you? Do you get the same feeling? So it usually is a tribe or a collaboration or a wolf pack effect when that is done because you want to make sure, but also it gives the individual loan officer a sense of what is the culture and is Sean just, I mean, they expect me to sell, right? They expect me to be shiny and so they talk to a Kathryn who's actually a loan officer in the trenches. What is she saying about the experience? Is it, well, let me really tell you how it's going on. I mean, but a leader that gives them access, as in call anybody on the Rolodex, call anybody that you can find on the internet. I think that's important. They should want you to do that. No company is perfect. You're going to get not every day, every file is great. Sometimes that's because the company could have done better. Sometimes the loan officer could have done better. But if we can look at it, how do we get our betters better? Hopefully that's the company that you find and you want to go to work for.
Oh, this is a topic I'd love to talk about because I think recruiting is so important and so key and it has changed. And I'm super hypercritical of it after going through the process. So this has been refreshing and insightful. And I got some good thoughts out of it. So I would love to talk more at some point. But at this point, we're almost out of time. So any closing thoughts, Michael, and then we'll throw it back to Sean as well.
Yeah, the closing thoughts I have is now that I'm back in the Pacific Northwest, I cannot wait to get out on the hiking trail where we can dig into some of the backstories. Sean, you've done a great job today. I hope most of our audience picked up on really one very simple theme, and that is Sean is going to build everything he does around a relationship, and that's going to drive him to ask better questions. It's going to drive him to get to know someone better. It's going to drive him to figure out how to implement the combination of tools and technology that someone needs, but ultimately it's going to boil down to that thing. And I hope our audience picked up on that, because so often we get caught in a storyline that strays away from the relationship. And I think, Sean, you've done a great job of bringing us back to the center.
Well, I'm grateful that you would think that I could add value to your followers. And as a follower myself, I'm appreciate both of you, and thank you for the time. And if you have more questions, you can always find me on the internet. I'm out there. Don't stalk me, just reach out to me.
Also, I want to add one thing that I feel like this information isn't just applicable to mortgage and isn't just applicable to recruiting. It's anybody that is looking to help build a team, to sell. I think that connection piece, which we dug into a lot today, is important for anybody in business. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that you can apply it with a different lens, because I think there's a lot that Sean said today that can be applicable to lots of things.
Well said, Kathryn. Well, Sean, listen, thank you for joining us today. I hope our audience is going to enjoy going back, reviewing this, and finding some of those nuggets that we highlighted, and starting to ask themselves the tougher questions, and maybe be willing to be more curious when they're out facing their audience as well. Folks, this has been the Building Bigger Lives podcast. As always, we drop episodes on Wednesdays, hoping to help you, the entrepreneur, build a fuller life, both personally and professionally. And we thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Take care.